One of the fundamental desires of us humans is the need to feel a sense of belonging. Once the basic essentials of food, water, and shelter are met, there is another burning hunger that we feel, and that is our craving for companionship. Man's need for a community of like-minded individuals is just as crucial to our survival as the food we eat and the water that we drink. In the late 1970s, just such a group of people neared the end of their journey in search of just such an ideal. But instead of a promised utopia of tolerance and prosperity, all they found at the end of that road was a nightmarish descent into the depths of madness, paranoia, and tragedy. The images you are looking at are a testament to what is broadly hailed as the linchpin for what we perceive as the modern-day cult. This is the horrific story of Jonestown.
Our twisted story begins in 1931 in the rugged hills of Indiana with the birth of one James Warren Jones to a World War I veteran named James Thurman Jones and his wife Lynetta. With the onset of the Great Depression, the Jones family moved to the city of Lynn, where their economic hardships only continue. Both James Sr. and Lynetta were often absent from the home, sometimes working 2 jobs apiece just to put food on the table. As a result, their son was left alone to his own devices. From as early as the age of 7, Jones began to exhibit classic psychopathic behaviors. There are reports of Jones torturing, killing, and burying several small animals the family kept. Jones would often blatantly lie to his parents when they noticed that these animals had inexplicably gone missing. Along with this disturbing pastime, Jones would also develop an unhealthy obsession with stories from his old Bible. The young boy would often lose himself in the tales of Noah, Daniel, and Adam as a form of escapism from his bleak and troubled existence. In his teen years, Jones would find another destructive outlet for his increasing psychopathic personality, namely, the dark left-wing ideologies of such tyrants and dictators like Mao Zedong, Joseph Stalin, and Vladimir Lenin. He began to dream of constructing his own social communist paradise. The combination of pseudo-biblical doctrine, leftist indoctrination, and his own inherited psychopathy would prove a lethal mix. Jones would begin to perpetuate his obsession with trying to form his own diverse and inclusive government state. In his early 20s, Jones began to frequent extremist far-left fringe groups like the so-called snake handler churches that began to pop up. These splinter cells of the more mainstream Pentecostal movements had extreme and even violent interpretations of salvation and apocalyptic end-time doctrines. Despite all this, Jones managed to attain top grades in his academic studies, graduating with top honors. By the time Jones was in his late 20s, he was already a prominent voice of many far-left political and religious groups, which culminated in 1956 when Jones founded his own church, which he named the People's Temple. The name would reflect Jones's affinity and extreme admiration for all things communist. Jones was widely praised for his outward acceptance of racial integration, despite internal reports of Jones actually being a virulent racist and sexual predator behind closed doors. In the more conservative environment of Indiana, Jones was openly criticized for his adoption of a new political movement he coined apostolic socialism. After only a few years, the mounting pressure from Indiana officials forced Jones to move the People's Temple across the country. His destination was the sunny streets of San Francisco during the counterculture heyday of Haight-Ashbury. However, Jones's motivation for relocating was twofold. In addition to conservative backlash, Jones's mounting paranoia about nuclear fallout also played a large role in his choosing of downtown San Francisco. Several articles of the day named parts of California as some of the safest shelter points in the continental United States to seek refuge in the shadow of global nuclear holocaust. For a time, the People's Temple seemed to flourish in its new surroundings, providing a number of social services for the community. This included drives for the homeless, soup kitchens, and legal services. All the while, Jones continued to spread his far-left political activism, espousing the notion of an ownership-free society where no one would own property, housing, or goods. Capitalism would be abolished, and all aspects of new civilization would be wards of an all-encompassing state. It was during this time that Jones' spiritual direction would take a bizarre and menacing twist. He started delivering messages that condemned Orthodox Christianity, even going so far as denouncing the Holy Scriptures as a subversive tool of control. Jones was increasingly elevating himself to a demigod status, often heard saying that he was the reincarnation Mahatma Gandhi, Lenin, and Buddha all rolled into one. Allegations of extreme sexual abuse were also on the rise within Jones's own congregation, not to mention reports of drug use and perverse occultic practices also being widespread. Outside scrutiny slowly mounted much the same way they had back in India, as San Francisco officials and even some law enforcement started to take notice of Jim Jones and what was going on behind the walls of the People's Temple. A young reporter by the name of Marshall Kilduff proved to be the most aggressive critic of Jones. Kilduff published several scathing exposés and articles detailing the alleged abuses of Jones and the People's Temple. Kilduff proposed that Jones was guilty of outright criminal conspiracy. Jones was facing opposition at nearly every turn, which prompted him to make a drastic, and many would say, irrational decision. The People's Temple would once again pull up their tent stakes and go on the run. Jones bought a vast plot of land in the arid fields of the Guyanese jungle. Under the working title of the People's Temple Agricultural Project, Jones was quickly building a budding compound in the middle of the South American rainforest, where he hoped he would finally be free of the probing reporters and suspicious eyes of law enforcement. It was here that he promised to raise the apostolic communist utopia he desperately dreamed of, a place where he and his wayward followers would thrive during what he believed was the coming nuclear Armageddon. This so-called paradise in the middle of the disease-ridden jungle was named, aptly enough, Jonestown. Surrounded by almost 1,000 of his most devoted disciples, Jones secluded himself in the jungles of Guyana. His drug use increased to manic levels, which only served to heighten his already rampant paranoia. Jones would go on almost daily tirades, where he warned his followers that even here deep within the jungle, all of them were being watched. Jim Jones had become the diabolical dictator that he so idolized in his youth. Meanwhile, back in the States, several family members of those that had fled with Jones to Guyana formed a commission. They pleaded with authorities to launch an official inquiry into the forming of Jonestown. This caught the attention of Congressman Leo Ryan, and in the subsequent months, Congressman Ryan led what he called an investigatory expedition down to Guyana to see exactly what was happening at Jonestown. Ryan led a concerted group of reporters, television crew, and concerned relatives down to South America. After only 3 days, the congressman was forced to leave Jonestown after a fanatical loyalist of Jones had attacked him with a knife. Despite this, Congressman Ryan vowed to return with an even larger camera crew and possible military aid from the Guyanese government, as he was not yet done with Jones. As Ryan prepared to return to the United States, he had in tow a few of Jones' disillusioned congregation who desperately wanted to leave the sweltering compound. With Congressman Ryan threatening to return with substantial backup, Jones realized that his twisted house of cards was collapsing all around him. And so, like a typical cornered animal, Jones lashed out. Like any selfish tyrant, Jim Jones decided that he wasn't about to go out alone. If he was going down, he was going to bring his followers down with him. In an act of unparalleled cruelty and cowardice, Jones forced nearly 1,000 of his parishioners to drink down a lethal concoction of poison and fruit punch. As his followers were being led to their deaths, Congressman Ryan faced his own judgment at the hands of a group of armed militants loyal to Jones. On November 18, 1978, just before he was to board transport out of Guyana, Ryan, as well as several members of his entourage, were mercilessly gunned down outside of an airstrip several miles from the outskirts of Jonestown. Leo Ryan is noted as the only United States congressman to die in the line of duty, a direct result of left-wing cult violence. As for Jones himself, he refused to ingest the cyanide poison that had claimed the life of his congregation. Jim Jones died as the result of a self-inflicted gunshot to the head. Thus, he is recognized as the final casualty of the People's Temple cult.
Jim Jones will no doubt go down in history as one of the most deranged madmen of the 20th century. His promises of equity, social acceptance, and utilitarian living replaced with fear, control, and murder. For when people walk through the doors of the People's Temple, they ignore the small sign out on the lawn. You know, the one that read, "Question everything, and trust no one."
This is your chance. I'm here. I can take you out of here. I can lead you into that kingdom level above human. That can't happen unless you leave the human world that you're in.
What are the depths to which we as people are willing to sink in order to just belong? A disturbing fact about we as human beings is that sometimes belief can overtake logic. Conviction can oftentimes supersede reason. The potency of an ideology can birth a lethal form of fanaticism. Now, that seemed to be the case with a small group of UFO enthusiasts in late 1997 who fervently believed that their salvation lied in the teachings of an inadequate narcissist. One who had sold them a fallacy of a spaceship behind a comet that would ultimately lead them into the embrace of oblivion. This is the disturbing story of Heaven's Gate.
Strange suicide of the 39. It's very strange. The 18 men and 21 women whose bodies were found last night just north of San Diego may well have considered that now was the time to leave this world because they had been given the ultimate gift of everlasting life. This story will stretch your imagination before we're finished. Based on what we know, this may be about people who thought it was time to shed their human containers because out there behind the Hale-Bopp comet, there was a UFO waiting to transport them beyond this world to the kingdom of heaven.
We begin our strange odyssey with this man, one Marshall Applewhite. Born in the state of Texas in 1931, Applewhite is greeted by a downtrodden and desperate world at the peak of the Great Depression. As the son of a Presbyterian minister, young Applewhite was brought up in a strict and religious household. As Marshall grew, he started to notice distinct differences in the way that he interacted with his peers. From an early onset, Applewhite realized and tried to come to terms with his homosexuality. Because of the stigma at the time regarding his sexual orientation, Applewhite did everything he could to guard his secret. Later on, he did a tour of duty with the US Army, and afterward attended several different universities, including the college in Austin. During his academic years, Applewhite gained interest in the so-called New Age movement, a hodgepodge of different transcendental Eastern philosophies melded with contemporary Western ideas. After some years, Applewhite began to merge traditional Christianity with the modern UFO craze, forming a unique synthesis of science and spirituality. Shortly before leaving the academic world, Applewhite met 44-year-old Bonnie Lou Nettles. Nettles herself came from a troubled background. Like Applewhite, she was raised in a strict religious home However, as an adult, she made it a point to distance herself from organized religion. She eventually became a nurse, married, and had 4 children. As time went on, Nettles developed a fascination with the occult, most notably seances and the channeling of spirits. She divorced in 1972, where shortly after she began her association with Applewhite. The two bonded over their shared interest in New Age philosophy, and as a result formulated a shared pseudo-religious doctrine. Applewhite and Nettles began to preach that mankind had been planted on Earth by an advanced alien species, to whom they referred to as the Space Brothers. In their words, Earth was simply a garden to grow and harvest souls, and that every few thousand years or so, the world went through a cataclysmic purge known as spading under. During this supposed spading under, the Earth would be left as a barren and burnt-out shell, ripe and ready for the next batch of souls to be planted by the mysterious Space Brothers. The pair decided to take their philosophy and ideas on the road. Over the next several years, they gained a number of followers, the core tenet of their beliefs being that true salvation lied in the intervention of the Space Brothers. Applewhite and Nettles also taught that they were the fabled 2 witnesses prophesied in the Book of Revelation. The Space Brothers had entrusted them alone with the key to what they called the kingdom level above human. It was at this time that the duo gave their group its official title, namely the Heaven's Gate movement. Within the confines of Heaven's Gate, Applewhite and Nettles established a strict regime of daily rituals and re-education classes for their converts to follow and adhere to without question. They also made it a point to isolate their flock from all outside influence, especially their former friends and family. The only way to reach the kingdom level above human, according to Applewhite and Nettles, was absolute compliance and unwavering obedience. What had started as a quirky and odd movement of enlightenment had morphed into a controlling and dangerous cult. The group's leaders also went through a strange metamorphosis, as both adopted a subdued and almost androgynous type of appearance. Applewhite and Nettles went through a host of different names and titles, including Ty and Doe, Bo and Peep, as well as Herf and Net. What you're about to hear is a recorded phone call between a cult member named Gail and her estranged parents, whom at this point hadn't heard from their daughter in over 3 years. The conversation is both heartbreaking and disturbing. Take a listen.
Hello, honey.
Hello.
Oh, when you coming home?
I don't know, probably never.
Oh, no, Gary, you've got to come.
I thought you'd say that.
Oh, I want to see you so badly. Here, I guess your father wants to say something.
Okay.
Hi. How you doing?
Great. How about you?
All right. Geez, we miss you, Gail. Yeah, we don't know what you're doing. We're worried about you. Why, how about coming up for a visit? Why?
Busy?
Oh, you can't be that busy. Come up and see us. I'll buy you a ticket. We want to see you. You can't be that busy. You can't see your family. Can you?
I don't know.
Ah, come on. Yeah, his out.
So what kind of group are you with?
Well, kind of like monks, I guess.
Oh, really? Yeah.
We're all celibate.
Uh-huh. Oh, that's nice. Uh-huh. You eating well? You're not getting fat, are you?
No.
Good. There's no way I can contact you. You have to contact me? Okay. Well, keep in contact, babe, because I love you so much and I miss you awfully. And how about coming home for Christmas? No Christmas? What are you going to do for Christmas? Well, I'd love to have you come home for Christmas, Gayla. You know how it is. All right? Don't forget how much I love you. First chance you can get, come home for a visit. Bye. Love you.
You'll recall of how Applewhite and Nettles adopted a bizarre appearance a few years into the cultivation of Heaven's Gate. This key point would be greatly expanded upon and would in fact become one of the main tenets of the cult's ideology. You see, according to the pair of fascist gurus, androgyny was one of the highest forms of honor one could achieve in the kingdom level above human. The spiritual realm of the Space Brothers was one that did not contain gender or sex. In recent years, this has become a paramount talking point of the modern-day left. Within Heaven's Gate, the members were absolutely forbidden from engaging in any sort of sexual contact with each other. Several of the men even went as far as opting to undergo castration procedures to be free of any latent desires or urges. In 1985, Bonnie Nettles dies of liver cancer and leaves Applewhite as the group's sole leader. After Nettles' death, Applewhite's mental state degrades to such a degree that he regularly suffers bouts of psychosis and delusion. He believed he was receiving telepathic communication from Nettles and that she was guiding him to a supposed revelation. It was here that Applewhite learned of the Hale-Bopp comet, which was due to make a close pass to the Earth in the early part of the year 1997. This, he believed, was the long-awaited sign that the group had been pining for. In reality, this was an out Applewhite could thoroughly exploit for his own selfish and demented ends. Applewhite relayed to his followers that both Nettles and the Space Brothers were instructing them that the spading under of the Earth was imminent, and in order for them to escape the coming destruction was to spiritually board a UFO that would be concealed in the tail of the comet. But in order to get aboard this so-called lifeboat, they would have to shed their physical bodies, or in other words, they had to commit ritual suicide to save their souls. With the Hale-Bopp comet due to have its closest approach on March 22, 1997, Heaven's Gate had to act fast. 4 days after the comet's passing, 39 members of the Heaven's Gate cult, including Marshall Applewhite himself, committed mass suicide in a lavish mansion in the community of Rancho Santa Fe. The members died from a combination of ingested barbiturates and suffocation, many of them found with plastic bags over their heads. One strange detail that is still not fully explained is all 39 members were found wearing a pair of Nike low-top running shoes. However, authorities believe this was just another attempt by Applewhite to strip his followers of all individuality, symbolizing their complete assimilation into a faceless collective. This was simply one last act of total control he could subjugate them to.
For over 25 years, Marshall Applewhite and Bonnie Lou Nettles subjected their followers to humiliating and degrading acts of dehumanization. They have certainly earned their place as two of the most callous and heartless cult leaders in history. But they serve as a warning to all of us. So before you decide to check out a new seminar for enlightenment or pick up a brochure for an unknown spiritual movement, be sure to check out the fine print. You'll find it in the bottom left corner, and it'll read as such. Question everything, and trust no one. Until next time.